So just setting the scene very quickly. Many of you already know who follow us on social media, what the difference is between AI, machine learning, and deep learning. But I thought just a quick recap, because we will refer to, and Jim and myself have discussed this before as Spiros, that whilst in data science we get very excited about the differentials between deep learning, machine learning, etc., and reinforcement learning. Here we're going to refer to the whole umbrella. AI is the umbrella term that captures everything. Because from a commercial perspective, if you're going to a CEO of a bank or the CEO of a hospital trust, at the end of the day, for them, it's all AI. Even if at the data science level, we get very passionate about different machine learning and deep learning techniques. But crucially, this was an area that, what does AI actually refer to? It's computing systems which are capable of performing tasks that humans are very good at. For example, recognizing objects, and we're seeing a lot of advances now with language skills that will come onto natural language processing when a lot of the pioneering work had been done in computer vision earlier. And we get very excited on that definition of things like artificial general intelligence, which is AI that can generalize and match human capabilities. And that's a vision for the future. The AI that we have today is narrow AI. And in spite of what anyone will tell you, the hard reality in computer science and AI, we can tell you, promise you, today's AI cannot be AGI. It won't magically, like that movie where they transformed and the model came out, or it's two kids in their parents' garage and suddenly you produce AGI. The barriers to AGI are huge. They're very, very complex. We won't talk about them right now because it will take a whole long session to get there. But deep machine learning is a field of AI that's really been exploding over the last decade. It was coined by Arthur Samuel in 1959, and it refers to the field of AI that applies statistical methods to enable computer systems to learn from data and stress that data towards an end goal. And a lot of the posts you'll see from Jim and Spiros and others out there emphasize data as being really important. And data is at the heart of digital transformation and capabilities in AI. And then deep learning is really a subset in turn of machine learning, which is a subset of AI. And that's why we're going to refer to AI in this talk as the umbrella for all of it. But deep learning is neural networks. And when they have several hidden layers, more than multiple hidden layers, they're referred to deep neural networks as opposed to shallow neural networks. And that's where a lot of the innovation in AI has been happening over the last decade. And we'll come on to that in a second, with computer vision, natural language processing, etc. So this chart here is quite important. It's from KPMG in 2018. And it shows actually that it's still embryonic in its market size, right? You can see this rapid growth to 2025, 231.9 billion. But look where we are. This was done in 2018, and it's still showing even by 2020 and this year, it's about 27 billion. It's still a relatively early market. So when people get a bit excited about AI and say AI is taking over the world, but a lot of corporates, as Jim and Spiros point out in their posts, have not yet adopted AI. And I'm sure Jim will have a lot to say about that, as will Spiros, in terms of banks, insurance companies, etc. It's still a lot of talk about pet projects, but in actual fact, a lot of AI hasn't really come through yet in terms of core, outside of Silicon Valley giants, outside of social media giants. And this is something that I know Spiros has posted before, and others, and Visual Capitalists, and it shows how much powerful the data is, the size of huge data. 90% of the data that's been created in human history was created in the last 2 years, according to IBM. And this chart shows how the social media and tech giants dominate a lot of that data. And that's why they have the huge advantages on AI. And corporates, as Jim keeps on pointing out, including the banking sector, need to become data-driven to really digitally transform and understand the value of their data to personalize services. Otherwise, they'll go obsolete. This just kind of like summarizes that timeline, how we had AI, expert systems, etc., but they fell away in the 80s. They didn't really scale properly, and we had this AI winter. Then machine learning took over in the 90s, and in particular the early 2000s. And the last decade, deep learning really came to the forefront. We're going to talk a little bit about 5G as well, because 5G is going to be a huge enabler of edge computing and intelligent devices, bringing technologies like AR and VR that Jim and Spiros and others are very passionate about. And April indeed, and a lot of the technologies that April will be using with their clients in the future. But in actual fact, they don't work with 4G. And it's not just the faster speeds and lower latency, it's the fact that capacity, as April was saying to me when we met in London, that a lot of the time her 4G signal drops in New York And it's the same here in London, right? Because 4G networks are maxed out in capacity, and 5G can handle, depending on who you believe, 1,000 to 100,000, again, depending on who you believe, connected devices or traffic per square unit of measurement. So every square centimeter, at least 1,000 more devices. And it's non-ionizing, as this chart from the BBC shows. It doesn't go through human cells. It's not dangerous to us, despite all these things on social media. Whereas, ironically, ultraviolet rays are. So if you're sitting out in the sun, make sure you've got your sun cream on, because that's far more dangerous to you than 5G waves are. So it's going to enable edge computing that I've discussed with Spiros and Jim and April and Xavier and many others on here, that is really going to pioneer this next wave of innovation going forwards. Intelligent devices, personalized engagements on your device, rather than a cloud and waiting with latency to come back, which wouldn't work on an autonomous car or a robot, because by the time the signal comes back and the car doesn't know to turn left or right, it's going to crash and they have to communicate with each other. And you don't want all that traffic going back and forth on the internet either. You want it processed where the data is, which is going to be on your mobile, it's going to be on smart cameras, etc. around us. So you'll have AI not on the cloud server, but actually on the devices. And this chart from Statista shows that by 2025, we're forecast to have 75 billion devices connected to the internet. That's 9 per person on the planet. And look at that steep growth. So what's that going to do? Look at this then on data then. Data is going to go exponentially, which comes to a point that Jim and Spiros and others have made, and Xavier, that we're going to get this explosion in data. You have to digitally transform, because you need machine learning to make sense of that data that's coming. Otherwise, you're just going to drown. Really, really quick history, and then we'll jump onto the other things and hand over to the panel. So the last decade's seen a lot of innovation. 2012, AlexNet was when Google and Facebook really paid attention to deep learning. It won the computer vision like equivalent of the World Cup competition. ImageNet, using convolutional neural networks and GPUs. A lot of tech majors got excited. DeepMind 2013 came up with deep reinforcement learning paper. Ian Goodfellow 2014 created GANs, published GANs, which are known for deepfakes today. XGBoost gets used by a lot of machine learning engineers outside of deep learning for tabular data, introduced in 2014. AlphaGo beats the world champion in 2016, which showed something as complex as Go, a very complex game with a huge number of moves. And many didn't think in 2016 AI was ready to be a human world champion in that game, and it did. 2017, light gradient boosting introduced by Microsoft as a stable version. Myself and others use it for tabular data, very powerful, and CatBoost from Yandex. Then in 2017, Uber produced a paper on deep neural evolution to compete against deep reinforcement learning. 2017, a big moment for natural language processing. I know Jim's very passionate about natural language processing. Well, 2017 was a big moment when transformers came. And then in 2018, BERT got introduced, bidirectional encoder representations by Google. That's leading a lot of the innovations in sequence to sequence and the way we handle text and natural language processing in AI. 2018, StyleGAN, the deepfakes, if you like, took on a new level with NVIDIA creating artificial images of faces that look very realistic, as though they're superstars, but you couldn't even tell. And you can see the journeys continued last year and even now with multi-agent deep reinforcement learning from AlphaStar and Facebook's neural machine translation. So I'm going to do this and then hand over to the panel, these 2 slides really. This is an overview. Many of you have seen my blog, will have seen this before, how every area of fintech and insurtech is touched by AI, whichever area it is. This is by Standard & Poor's, and I think Jim Spiros and Xavier and April, and indeed Paolo, being the CEO of a fintech credit startup, will appreciate that. You see on the left, here's the actual data for Standard & Poor's. Here is a traditional statistical linear model. Can't map the reality of the relationship. And here with the random forest and machine learning, we get much more closer to what the actual data looks like. And this diagram, this image shows you the power of machine learning. It's not about Terminator robots walking down the street. It's like Jim said before in his posts, it's about making sense of the data that's too big for humans. This statement by Standard & Poor's says it here. A human analyst could not infer from the data better insights than a human analyst could infer from the data, because the data is too big and too much variety, too complex. And very quickly, because I know Jim and Spiros are passionate about marketing. Well, here is k-means, and you can see the number of clusters, the information again you get as you keep on going down. And here, you can see k-means being used as unsupervised machine learning, actually showing you with 6 clusters, finding 6 clusters of customers itself. And then going, sorry, that should actually say 4 clusters. And now we go to 6 clusters. And you can see the split of the customers. And in particular, when you look at the light blue and the dark blue, and you look going from 4, where it was green, to here, now you can differentiate, because the ones at the top are spending more in your store, on your brand, whereas the ones on the lower element side are spending less, but they've got the same income. So now you can focus on this light blue to say, these are some of my top customers, even though they're from the lower income segment. And then my final part is going to be quickly on healthcare, because Martin will cover that in more detail. But you can see, again, all elements of healthcare will be affected, which is topical with COVID-19. Electronic health records with text mining, computer vision for image recognition and diagnosis, drug discovery. We're all hoping for an accelerated drug or vaccine for COVID-19, for example. The amount of money, as you can see, that's going to go into healthcare AI is set to grow dramatically from 2.1 to 36.1 billion, according to market analysts. And then the problem, as you can see, with drug discovery, I've chatted about this with Jim, it takes years, huge number don't make it, and with COVID-19, it's very costly. According to the industry itself, it's $2.1 billion, $2.6 billion to create a drug, 10 to the 60 to 10 to the 100 potential molecule compounds. That's more stars than there are in the universe, hugely complex. So this is our own actual drug discovery model. It shows you what it can do. We test for toxicity to humans, and we actually generated for our deep learning model these compounds, novel compounds. And then here, the last thing that I'm going to stop, this is our computer vision using deep learning for skin cancer. And you can see this one is very visible to the eye, right? And this is the computer vision telling the doctor what it saw. But look at patient number 2. That's very hard for the human doctor to see. And look here on the right, our deep learning model, this is our own, my deep learning model, actually detects it and tells the doctor what it was looking at. And that, again, is the power of AI today. So now I'm going to hand over to our superstar panel. I'm really delighted that everyone's come over. I just want to quickly set the scene to show you what AI actually is and its power. And I'm going to hand over. Thanks a lot, guys.
Imtiaz, thank you. Thank you so much for setting the scene. Remember, you've got these reactions down here that you can put up if you just want to send a message on to any of our speakers. Spiros, you're on a timeline, so I'll start with you. If you can give me, let's say, up to 3 sentences of introduction, and then tell us what sort of projects and tech startups are catching your eye at the moment. What do you think good looks like now?
Most people, I mean, everyone knows me, I guess. Maybe they haven't met me, but I'm a venture capitalist. I'm involved with WeFox. It's the biggest insurtech company in Europe. I'm involved in cybersecurity, with MediaStalk, all kinds of startups. And I'm privileged to be part of this community. And when you talk about, to make it short, what excites me is there's, for instance, one insurtech company called Concirus, which basically controls almost 70% of the maritime market for insurances with big data and analytics. And you can see that small startups like this, based in London, they're just more agile. I mean, the problem with this panel is that we all know this stuff. So basically, it's like carrying sand to the beach. I mean, it's a nice thing to be among you guys and ladies and gentlemen and girls. But those are the things that excite me. But I'm also more worried, like every one of us, about COVID-19. I think it's really going to hurt our industry a lot, because I think most startups somehow they never experienced a crisis like this. I mean, I'm in an age, I experienced 2001. So it's actually even worse now. I think a lot of those startups will disappear. And I posted today a great article by Jim, and I wouldn't talk much about it because Jim has the opportunity to say these things since it's his article. But it's a sad time for our industry, I think. And if you're not lucky enough, Fox was lucky enough to have raised 225 million last year. If you don't have the money now, it's not going to come now. It's like everyone is circling his wagons, and it's like if you're a venture capitalist, even big one, basically where you're going to put your money in. It's just some of your investments, but I don't see much new funding for new startups at this point. But I hope I'm wrong. I've seen a good statistic about angel investors. Angel investors are the only investors that invest in such times, because I think they have a different mindset. But the more bigger the structures become, the more it's this circular wagons mentality. I kept it kind of short because everyone has his opportunity to talk about it,
Yeah, that's very thoughtful. Jim, talk to me about fakers and makers. You're right, the tide's gone out. So what's happened?
Yeah, a couple things. To Spyros's comments about the fintechs, I think we're up against, both in the fintech space and well as the banking space, a point where a couple things are happening. Number one, the traditional banks have talked about AI a lot more than they've done AI. Almost every institution uses AI and machine learning for risk and fraud and security, but they don't use it for the consumer-facing dynamics of what's possible. Which once COVID came and everybody had to go digital, all of a sudden it exposed the the emperor has no clothes type moment, where you realize that a lot of organizations fake digital, fake having analytics in place, and fake data and machine learning. Well, in the same sense, even though the fintechs had a lot of that figured out, the challenge right now is there's a run rate of cash. That means that more than 50% of small fintechs, medium-sized fintechs, only have until September to live without additional funding. So the whole issue of being able to actually have an ongoing model that makes money means that both in traditional banking and in the fintech world, I think we're going to see a tremendous shrinkage of the marketplace, not of the biggest, not of the smallest, but of the mid-market. Those that don't have a differentiation model, do not have the commitment to move forward, and can't find a partner. And that goes as well as for these mid-sized banks, because the challenge for them is they may not have the culture, they may not have the attitude, they may not have the ability to buy all the new technology, to move forward in a digital way. The problem is the M&A market may not be very rich, may not be very rich, because even the biggest firms aren't going to necessarily want to take on other firms at a time when their finances are not looking all that good, the capital's not looking that good. So I think the biggest challenge right now, with those things being the challenge, I should say, the opportunity is tremendous. Right now, it's as I talk about it, a heart attack moment. You go to the doctor for 40 years, and your doctor keeps on saying, you know what, you got to lose some weight. You got to do things differently. It's not good. And then you come to him this last time, and he goes, oh, by the way, you're going to die. It's amazing how quickly you can get on a treadmill and you can change to vegetarian eating when you have that heart attack moment. Well, this is what COVID is. It's a heart attack moment, the wake-up moment that says, the world has stopped. Are you going to be on, or are you going to be getting off the train as we go forward? It is a great moment. It's a scary moment with regard to not just financial institutions, but for all businesses. We're going to see a whole big transformation, and it's going to be a matter of, it gets back down to culture. I interviewed the chairman of Lemonade 2 weeks ago for the Bank and Transform podcast. He said it really well. The biggest challenge to digital transformation is legacy culture. That comment by itself says a lot. And it also says a lot for the fintechs. It says the biggest challenge to growth is depending too much on external funding and not having an ongoing business model.
Yeah, well said, Jim. April, there's lots of lessons that we can learn from this. What lessons can the VCs learn from this?
Well, I think, I would say that VCs have been a little bit more cautious, but I guess we've seen, to Craig's point, he put in the group here, in the wealth tech space, some real movement here. There have been a lot of investments that have happened, and people have taken a look at, to your point earlier in the introduction, MTS, how AI, particularly how personalization, customization can really help improve the client experience. And in wealth management, that's huge, and that's everything now. And that's how wealth tech has really sort of taken advantage. It's its real marketing moment in terms of COVID-19. So I think there's a real opportunity for some of the incumbents here to pick up some of these fintechs or wealth techs, maybe at a lower rate than they would have. But I think that they have the impetus for a lot of movement now. And that's what we see in terms of the wealth tech space. So there's real opportunity. And then on the marketing side, similarly, being able to identify clients, being able to take all of this data that we've been talking about that MTS presented when we started, and amalgamate that to target clients, get closer to clients. And then even the AI in healthcare, and some of those startups are starting to make their way over to the wealth space as people think about financial wellness more broadly.
Deals are still being done, aren't they?
They are. And I think that gives us a lot of encouragement and hope. And that's sort of an upside where I feel like the current environment has given us a stress test like no other. So firms that have thought that their digital was in place are really finding out that it might not be. They're finding gaps or finding holes, and they're looking to fill them immediately and quickly, and they must, right, in order to continue to do business. And the way to do that is not to go back to their development labs, right, inside some of these big institutions, but to go out and purchase that technology or purchase that knowledge that they need and fill in so they can move forward.
Well, I think your point, April, the funding hasn't dried up. What it is going to be much more focused on low risk situations. So the stronger you get stronger, the bigger you get bigger. And those organizations that don't have a differentiation model, do not have clients on the books that they will be selling technology to, that have really been living on the next funding round, are going to suffer. The risk tolerance right now, look at what's happening in the banking industry. Savings rates from consumers who don't have as much money they did before COVID are skyrocketing. Why? Because it's our depression moment. Our parents or grandparents' depression moment. They're going, you know what? I'm not going to get caught again. Well, that same thing's going to be said for fintech. I mean, before COVID, every firm that came out got funding. Why? Everybody want to get on the train. Well, the train came to a screeching halt on March 1st.
Spiros, is fintech seen as a leader for digital transformation and for using AI? Can insurtech, wealth tech, those sort of industries learn from core fintech?
I think the survivors of this crisis will be better off, as Jim said in April. I mean, I think the mindset, cash flow management, which is I always emphasize with all startups, that will be even more an issue. And I think there will be a new generation of the startups that survive and new startups that will come out of this time. And they're going to be healthier. There will be more emphasis on clients, more emphasis on profits, and less on growth. I think the trick will be not aiming for growth, but aiming for sustainability and for business, And COVID.
Just to jump in, I was just going to say, just
Please
to
go.
solve real. Sorry, Spiros. I was going to say, just to solve real business problems instead of just someone's, brainstorm, right, of some cool shiny object. But now I feel like everything's really targeted toward more solving of business problems, and that's what makes them valuable.
Well, you also have a situation. You also have a situation that everybody's getting hurt here. I think companies that show empathy in the truest sense of the word, that really are out there for the consumer good, are going to, the people before profits, are going to make a lot of money and are going to be viewed in a much different light, not as being soft, but being strong, because we're already seeing it. I mean, I think once the banks in the US at least turn back on, whatever we want to call that, a lot of consumers are going to remember who remembered them and who turned their back on them. I mean, I know for myself, I'm closing a relationship because of what happened during the COVID crisis, because they weren't there. They treated me just like worse than everybody else. You know, and I have great examples of it, but I think you're going to see switch in the UK. I think your switching rates are going to go way up. I think your strong fintechs will benefit because consumers are going to remember who's doing business the right way.
Actually, one of my startups, we waived the fees for 2 months before the customers asked us, and I think that's a signal to say you're suffering, so let's try to help each other, and we waived a substantial amount of money, and I think people will remember that, and if not, at least we thought it's the right thing to do.
Jim, is this a wake-up call for banks now? Are they going to take digital transformation seriously? Are they going to do it properly?
We're already seeing it. I had a conference call with a major mobile telco, and they said all the initiatives that were being talked about that were kind of hot, but they just didn't pull the trigger. Everybody I know is working harder than ever to get things up and running, but you're still going to find many organizations that just find the need or the move towards digital transformation too big. You know, what's interesting, the wake-up call, if you want to open an account at a firm that said they had digital account opening but required you to come in for a wet signature or to make the deposit, they haven't opened an account since March 1st. That's a pretty doggone big wake-up call. On the other hand, you know, those organizations that really understand digital, that have the culture to really reinforce what needs to be done, are going to succeed, and they were succeeding. I think, you know, we're seeing some tremendous innovation by small banking firms in the U.S. We pick our favorite with Joe Castilla, but the reality is they're doing so many things from a small organization basis to be there for the consumer that they don't have to be digital, but they're doing things differently, and they're doing things with the right thing in mind. And I think, yeah, it's a wake-up call. I am very concerned about the banking mid-market. I think that the path of digital transformation is too long. The investment is too high from their perspective, and the culture, the vision of the organizations is stuck in the past. It's the same old boys network, and I'm going to say it exactly that way. It's the old boys network that didn't move them forward before is going to continue to keep them in the past.
Yeah, Jim, I won't name names, but billions of dollars have gone down the drain, literally, with banks that didn't know what the story was. April, what do you want to see from somebody coming to pitch to you around ethics? What kind of ethical strategy do you want them to be employing now? Does that matter?
Well, I think that's also been a wake-up call, and you know, is the shift really in priorities for people, if you go back to that. And that's what really, I think, underlies this opportunity for digital transformation. So it's not just the pitch or ethics or to investment firms, VCs, angels, and so on, but it's really the approach that big banks, wealth management, financial services institutions take to their clients. And that is the real marketing moment for them, as I was saying before. I don't know if anyone on this call, for example, has seen the Jpmorgan Chase TV ad, but it was totally awesome. And they were able to create that TV ad in a matter of days. And basically, it's a bunch of financial advisors that are all on their Zoom calls taking care of clients. And that's exactly what the ad looks like. And whereas they were unable to create something like that in the past, they had this ad buy, and they were able to not only get everything through compliance, create the ad, but show their advisors on Zoom. And it was really, really powerful to see something like that.
Well, April,
So
on that point, April, how many
Yeah.
how many traditional banks today have access to the branch level of outside programs such as Zoom? They don't have it. So that's a great commercial, and Chase may have that. But what's the difference between a TD that already has made the decision that their entire call centers have the option of being remote, and those financial institutions, when they come back to work, where their consumer says, you know what, I don't want to come into your branch, I want to do a visual call with you, and they go, I'm sorry, my bank doesn't give me access to outside programs.
So I think that's, again, an opportunity, as I was saying before, for the gaps, right, for firms to fill in and for startups that are able to provide a more secure environment than, say, Zoom, which we're on right now. I think that's what I meant before by the stress test of life, right? That's what we've shown, and some of the underbelly has been really exposed. But we see now that there's opportunity for video conferencing, video calls and things, and for firms to really adopt that and adapt their operations to that. So I feel like they're in the works, and a lot of these things are just sort of coming together. But to go back to your question, Richard, on the ethics, I feel like we're a warmer, sort of nicer society, and we want things to work better. And so I don't know what the others think, but I think that's what will sort of speed the plow for VC money, for relationships, for partnerships between fintechs, wealth techs, insurtechs, and the larger organizations. I think people are more willing to work together and want to fill these gaps and please clients. So I guess I feel positive and optimistic about, unfortunately, this pandemic has been horrible, and many of you maybe have seen the meme, what's driving digital transformation at your organization? Is it the CTO, the CIO, or COVID-19? But I think that there will be a lot of positive outcomes post-pandemic or during pandemic.
Spiros, I'll bring you back in here. I've always felt that companies confused their product roadmap with innovation and didn't actually really understand what innovation was. And we've seen that. I mean, actually, Jim talked about the Zoom bombing that he experienced and we experienced, and that's happened because a company suddenly realized that they had to take security seriously. And we see banks trying to work out how to have a secure conversation with a customer who's not sitting in their branch. Flip that coin around, and we've got companies that know security, your Googles and your tech companies, who now want to go and take some other market. We saw Samsung being mentioned in the chat. We know that Apple and many others are looking into how they can get involved with payments and money. So how do you know innovation versus roadmap? What do you look for?
I think if customers love it, it must be some innovation in it, at least some good experience. Maybe it's not very innovative, but it hits the demand. And I think with all the Zoom, etc., like we're using now, I think first banks are extremely cautious, and innovators and startups are extremely courageous. And you can't cover all the dots. And as you mature, you cover more dots, more security. It's like a kid goes running. It's going to fall. It doesn't think about falling. It's just doing it. And I think we should give those startups credit as long as they correct when things go wrong, like Zoom. But I didn't blame Zoom for its privacy. I mean, I hope they didn't do it purposely. I mean, in terms of like to misuse our data, like Facebook. But I like when I see mistakes happening, because then I see startups and companies that do take risks. Because if you take risk, if you do investments, some will not work out. You just cut your losses. Same with startups. Some innovation has to be adjusted to protect its customers, but we should not do blaming, because as long as they correct the mistakes, it's all right, And when I look at my startups, the ones I see, it's always I look at companies that can gain customers, and I guess they have something innovative that people like. I mean, innovation. It's a very complex word, what's innovative? A good client user experience is innovative, It's just different than what I had before, and I like it, or maybe not like it. or being friendly to your customers. Jim said, that's maybe innovative if nobody's friendly anymore. It's just doing something different than has been done before, and people love it. At the end of the day, I don't put too much thought to it. I just think if somebody sells me ice cream, even if somebody sold it for hundreds of years and people buy it more than they buy it somewhere else, maybe there's some good ice cream. That's what I care. I'm more about business. I'm not about intellectual things, because there are a lot of intellectual thoughts, but if nobody buys it, then it's just an idea, maybe an idea that time has not come, because that's the difference between success and not success. Sometimes it's timing. There were other companies before Facebook. There were other search engines before Google. It's a question of timing. So I think we should go away from just intellectual. I have a secret, and I let it go with this. It's like, I never study a company too much, because if you spend too much time on a company, you start believing the stuff they're saying instead of just experiencing it, that it's good, Because if you spend too much time on something, it's very hard to let go of your thought of saying, oh, maybe I spent too much time on it. Maybe I should continue liking it. We should say like children. It's like, oh, it excites me what April has, or Jim has to show, or Xavier, or any of us. And if that excites us, then we have something going. I mean, there's still hard work behind it, but I almost say too much. Forgive me for taking too much of the time.
But just tell us this then. Are you saying the first reaction is the best reaction?
It's the first one. It still needs due diligence afterwards. But if it doesn't excite me in the first reaction or second one, it's probably hard to excite other people, because we're a little jaded.
I'll open this back up to the three of you. Spiros talked about timing, and the timing now in terms of new products, new services, certainly would seem to be around clean tech, green tech, presence technologies, immersion technologies, security technologies. Is that what you mean by timing, that somebody brings something relevant to the challenges we're going through right now? Jim, can you take that one?
Yeah, I think that the timing's good, because we've seen some of the biggest startups start during times of major change, major disruption. Alibaba was started during the SARS epidemic, and I believe that there's a lot of new ideas that are coming out of this. I think organizations are going to see that, what has traction, what doesn't, what consumers want. Consumers, we were waiting for them to embrace contactless payments. We were waiting for them to embrace digital banking on many fronts, digital account opening. They kept on saying, oh, no, we want to go in the branch. Well, this 2 months, at least right now, transformation to digital in every aspect of your life has opened up new doors. I mean, we have grandmothers that are, only way they're communicating with their kids for the last 2 months is through Zoom and FaceTime. Only way that people have had groceries delivered is by an online app that is starting now to understand their buying habits, is now recommending what they may want to buy next, because they know, oh, you buy butter every other week. Well, why don't we put that on your list? You can tell us not. The consumer is becoming very aware of what we should know as financial institutions and financial entities. That's going to make an opening for technology companies. It's going to make an opening for fintechs, and it's going to make an opening for legacy financial institutions that get it. This disruption is unlike anything we've seen in our lifetime and may ever see again. It is not over. Somebody asked me, when's the next time you're going to do a presentation? I said, well, first, the flights have to come back. Secondly, I've got to want to get on one of them. Third, I got to want to speak in front of 2,000 people. Well, an event that's really big, that's coming up in the fall, it is unlikely that they're going to go back to the old methods, at least for now, because there's a complete disruption in the marketplace. That's an opportunity for new technologies.
There's a very human opportunity there as well, Jim, and this time has brought us together. I mean, think about this. If this was a big summit, and look at the speakers that we have here, I couldn't afford the bill. Let's be honest. Whatever you charged, it would be too much. But
what
instead,
are you saying? You're not paying? I'm joking. I'm joking.
Paying in kind, Spiros.
Well,
Paying
they
in
paid
love.
me. I don't know.
Excellent. I love it.
April's getting paid, but she promised she wouldn't tell anybody. Isn't
Oh,
that
I
right?
forgot. Yes.
April, same question to you. What does timing mean?
Well, in life, of course, timing is everything. And I agree with Jim. I mean, this is, and as I was saying, it's an opportunity for startups to come and fill the gaps, right? You might not know you need something until you know you need it. And so, I don't think that Amazon, even though they've had, huge growth, didn't plan for a pandemic, and so wasn't put up to the stress test. So firms that are doing delivery are now in the limelight. Firms that are filling these gaps and these needs are really more important. In terms of conferences, and travel, many of us here on this call would just, jump on a plane and travel somewhere and be very frivolous about that. And I think that we'll all be more thoughtful. And I don't think people are going to value large gatherings. I think that's where the practicality and the ethics will sort of touch. I think people will want to have more close and intimate meetings. Large-scale conferences won't be measured in terms of, number of people or some of these metrics that really don't mean anything, but maybe it'll be more important to meet more people and have more business transacted. And that's an opportunity for platforms that are networking to really, come to the market. So I think really everything is off the table. And as a society, we're going to change. And I think in large part, to the good.
April, thanks. Spiros, I'm going to let you go in about 30 seconds. But before you do, there's a lot of small businesses that are facing financial hardship right now. The big megacorps probably okay. Give us a bit of good news for small business right now.
I'm glad you got that one, Spiros.
Yes, I take one for the team. It's very hard to see anything positive, but I think life surprises us and people will surprise us. But I can't see at the moment now, but I think crisis brings out the best in people, and not only in human quality, but also innovation. I think people will be forced to think of new ways of doing things. And what we need to do is, though, support it. Basically, I think also small startups, I think we should promote our community even more, and the small fintech startups, in order to do our part. And I always tip more when I go somewhere, because we have a more freer in Switzerland, freer regulation in terms of COVID-19. And I give more money. I go to restaurants. I support. I do my bit. But I think that doesn't stop there. We really have to support the small startups and the small community.
It's interesting, though, when you think about it. Let's take the restaurant industry, which probably is most impacted. If you make great food, but if you hadn't built a good digital model for engagement and for selling that food, you get hurt. On the other hand, we have drive-through restaurants in the States right now, Chick-fil-A, that has found more and more efficient ways to distribute their food. They are building lanes because of the fact that they have found a way to digitally transform their business. I actually believe they're doing better now than they were doing before the COVID crisis. Now, what does that mean? It may mean the restaurant has to get online more and engage with customers more to get them to come back to buy from them. We have a restaurant locally it's a winery restaurant, so it's a great atmosphere. They did is they started building family style meals every day that you ordered. It was a set menu for 4 people every night. And you'd go there and they said, okay, tonight's gonna be this, the next night's gonna be this. Well, that means they needed less staff and they could produce a lot of the same thing. But what it did was it really got people to say, you know what, I'm dying for that meal that I don't have to cook, but I know is going to be great. And I tell him, I said, what's gonna happen when they come back? He goes, we can't get rid of this business now, because this is a narrow menu. It is allowed to be delivered. We're already seeing arguments with the delivery services over who pays for that because the margins aren't really good on that. But look at grocery stores. I mean, the grocery stores, many of them have completely changed their model to delivery models now, as opposed to come in and shop. I mean, Amazon, you know, the Whole Food, Amazon's merger, different opportunities out here. It's changing business, but it gets back down to digital. You know, I want to have my meal on my table when I get home, but I want a good meal. So make it easy for me with my phone, and people get that business. I think there's going to have to be a mixed model. Yeah, people are going to want to come in, but I'll guarantee you there's not a restaurant out there that can make a living on 50% of their tables filled.
No, impossible.
It's not going to happen.
No, the model isn't set up for that. Spiros, should we say adios?
Yes, thanks everyone. And the next time I will stay for the whole show, and it was a privilege, and thank you very much.
Thank you so much for your contribution.
Thanks.
Paola, let me bring you into this conversation, if I may. And that's because it'd be a pretty good time to know your customers' data right now and have a pretty good first-party data set. I see you smiling. But then we know at the same time that Amazon and so on are really struggling with their data because all the buying patterns have changed, and suddenly we're buying this when we were buying that. And I'm sure that story's similar across e-commerce and Alibaba that Jim mentioned. So what does good look like now for a company looking to understand their data?
So I love one of the slides that was in the presentation on the S&P slide on Intia's presentation earlier, because it's very true that it's now the time where artificial intelligence, machine learning can find insights in data and narratives that are just not detectable, by normal credit analysis. If we look at the historic, financial information and data on the basis of which, people make investment decisions or banks lend, money on the basis of this data, it's clearly insufficient. And if we need to characterize, it's imperfect, it's all data. And it's not comprehensive enough to give a good understanding of the underlying performance of the company. But most importantly, it doesn't really give a view on what can come next, so to say. So what we look at in the data gathering exercises and modeling exercise that we do, and there was another very interesting comment on our chat about the model libraries in Python not being tested as much as less sexy systems based on MATLAB and so have. It's very clear that once you ingest large quantity of financial information and data, you see narratives that are much more insightful than just looking at financial statements and financial reports. So if I look at a quality data set, as we call it, it needs to be. I think today most important than ever is timely, and it kind of goes back to a comment that was done previously by April, I think, that time is everything, and it's so true even in the data set that you offer, that you scrape from different sources and you offer to lenders, because one data point today has a very different meaning from the same data point, just months ago. There's a very lively debate in the credit investment community about adjustments to financial earnings, and a new financial metric has been introduced. There was a lot of Twitter chat in kind of specialist rooms about a new financial metric called EBITDA, which is earnings before interest and taxes, depreciation, amortization, and coronavirus. And the irony of that is people are adjusting the fact that coronavirus is having on their earnings by adding, you know, a new coronavirus adjustment. That in itself is a testament to the, you know, to the fact that the current data set is not fit for purpose. You know, it's not good enough. The job, I think, of data analytics companies like Credit Vision, a little bit like the name says, is to be able to offer decision makers a data set which gives them a better view of credit quality. So I think today is a really data granularity, you know, getting really to the KPIs of a business, and then when you put, you know, drops of data in at the right time, you find correlations between data that you never, you know, thought about. You know, you find trends and patterns that are not just embedded in the traditional business, you know, traditional models on the basis of which, you know, credit rating agencies, you know, rate their companies. So, to be honest, I think there's no better. I mean, we're excited about the opportunities that you know, the current environment is presenting to companies like Credit Vision and other fintechs, because you know, today more than ever before, the business model, you know, that we promote is valuable, you know, to people in a growing market when everything kind of goes well. And if an investment manager makes money, the investment manager is good. And if they lose money, you know, it's because of the market. You know, in a market like this, you know, companies that can offer a fresh approach to data analysis, I think, are you know, are kept in very high regard. And you know, in a way, you know, the credit market on which we operate is you know, miles behind you know, other markets in the application of you know, machine learning to data analysis. So in a way, it's good for us. But yeah, you know, to your question, I think, you know, what makes a quality data set, I think, is really about depth of data, breadth of data, delivered in a timely manner that allows you to perform you know, high power machine learning analysis to find narratives that are not you know, detectable otherwise.
Thanks, Paolo. That's very deep and wide as well in the response. Thank you. We're going to go to Martin in 4 minutes. Imtiaz, can you just weigh in and just get some final thoughts from Jim and April for me?
Yeah, and I think first of all, I wanted to mention actually the first time I met Jim, in fact, the first time anyone from social media was Jim meeting me here in London with Paolo. I don't know if you recall, Jim, 3 years ago it was. And Paolo kindly hosted us and he came over and we had those brainstorming sessions in Old 89. And I think it'd be great to just get the thoughts of Jim and April, building on what Paolo said and Paolo's thoughts as well, in terms of the fintech ecosystems, because you were hearing, obviously I don't want to get Paolo into any trouble because you're part of Old 39, of course, as I used to be before, but this is going to be, this whole thing, what's going on right now, and the growth in remote working, etc. What's it going to do to the actual startup ecosystem? And thoughts from April, Jim, and Paolo. Later we can ask Xavier later on that as well.
Go ahead, April.
Oh, thanks, Jim. So I would say, you know, the whole idea of work and future of work is now changed. Real estate, if we're going to talk about investments, you know, people have now seen that work from home can really work. So in a city like New York, where you might spend 2 hours commuting to an office, 2 hours there, 2 hours back, it eats into 4 hours of your workday. I think that the way businesses are configured and the way people work is going to really change. And that's no secret. So for cities like London, New York, that have a lot of commercial real estate, have to think about how to reconfigure some of those, many of those buildings into something that's more useful and valuable in this new economy. So I know some of the larger banks and financial services institutions have been closing down a lot of their office space and thinking that they're going to have shared space or enable people to come in half-time home and half-time in the half-time home, half-time in the office, shared desks. So I think we're going to see all of that change, and I think that's going to actually lead, if you want to tie it back to the ethics and the feeling, it's just going to give people a little bit better feeling about their connection with their institution, with their employer, and humanize them a little bit.
Thanks for that. Jim, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, April, I agree fully. We're already seeing the transformation. A lot of organizations are realizing that not only is a work from home environment something they can trust people with, which was always the issue out there that nobody could test until it actually happened, but one that actually works better. I mean, TD Bank, again, thinking that their whole call center can be a work from home if desired by the person who works for them, is a great example. It's a great opportunity. It shows how technology can shift. You can still monitor calls. You can still measure everything you wanted to measure, but give people the flexibility. You know, for some people, it's not going to be right. But, you know, you look at some of these modern office environments that were completely open structure, that people brought in their computer, they sit down at a community desk, work from there. That doesn't make any sense anymore. I mean, on any front. While it was the best way to work before, it really was a work independent environment, but at an office. And I think what we're going to find is it's not a matter of work from home or work at the office. It's work. Work is work. And we're all communicating digitally anyway. We could all be in the same room right now and we have the same conversation. You know, it's maybe not quite as orderly, but you know, we'd see each other. We may not be as casual, but I think it's changed everything. And I think it's changed the ability to move forward. I think we've seen a lot of partnerships work better because they're now in a very tight environment. I remember most of us who work remotely now worked in offices at one point, and you'd get to 2 o'clock in the afternoon, you go, I finished everything that I thought I was going to finish. What in the world happened? Well, you didn't have the conference room meetings that everybody was invited to, that nobody had to be at. We're seeing that with Zoom meetings where, you know, people, I'm not going to point out anybody, but, you know, you go to that static picture, you can do anything you want. But the reality is a lot of times we just invite for the politeness of it. Well, with that gone, it's great how things can be accomplished, and it's only going to get better. I mean, we're finding out already that things are working faster. Things are working in people's schedules. I mean, you know, you do the same thing. Most of us do the same that work remotely. Heck, Sunday's a work day for me. Friday, maybe not as much. You know, so that flexibility also works.
Great. And Paolo, are we going to see impacts in the credit market as naturally as a result of what's going on? And how do you think they'll, and also property, etc.?
Yes, I think so. You know, I think there's going to be credit events on, you know, service providers that are really, you know, service office providers. And I think the focus on value added, you know, will shift. So it's going to be much more than, you know, glamorous, cool office space. But, you know, more kind of intangibles, if you like. So the ability to probably, you know, ecosystems will be built around common values and, you know, the ability to benefit as a group from, you know, shared, you know, shared services or synergies. I think, you know, the point on partnerships was, you know, was very important, and I think, you know, we will see a differentiation between operators, the more traditional ones, that will, you know, fail to adapt. You know, the kind of old dinosaurs are probably going to be struggling in the new environment, but at the same time, there could be, you know, new winners that can offer, that are more agile, and they can offer a richer, you know, experience to to members of their community. So I think, you know, a lot of focus will move away, you know, from intangibles to tangibles, I think,
Yep.
and that will drive the success of, you know, a successful.
I can right now.
Okay. Thanks a lot for that. So
Sounds good.
I think Jim.
And you got my stuff from
Richard. I don't know if you can eject Jim.
I wasn't running to, but if that's what's called for.
Yeah.
I'll pop him on mute for now.
I'm sure
When I hear people shouting, I get nervous now, but
I'm sure he won't mind in this instant.
Can you introduce Martin for me, Imtiaz?
Yeah, sure. I'll just say, Paolo, we'll bring you in later as well.
Yeah. We'll hear more from Paolo, definitely, yeah. Should we just thank Jim and April then, who made his dash off in just a moment?
Yes, thank you.
April, is there anything else you want to add before we go to Martin?
Yeah, no, it's so great. I have to say, I love the format. Thanks for including me. I think it's a great conversation. It'd be great to have more of these and bring everyone in. I really enjoyed it. And thanks so much. And great to see everyone. So can't be in person. It's the next best thing. Take care. Thanks to see you. Bye-bye.
So it's a great pleasure to introduce Martin. We'll come back to Paolo with Xavier, Elena, and Anya after this, talk about startup funding and all the challenges and opportunities there. But essentially, Martin, it's a great pleasure. It's a very senior artificial intelligence executive. He's worked in the healthcare sector in particular, but a huge wealth of experience, including being chief artificial intelligence officer at a unicorn. And I'll let Martin tell you more directly from himself about those roles. He's based in Switzerland, but worked pretty much all over the world with a very deep wealth of experience and a great reputation. So it's going to be great to hear from him. Martin, we can see your screen, but we can't hear you.
Mute now. There we go. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Good, very good. Well, thanks a lot, guys and gals. Yeah, I'm Martin Chuper. I've given you my LinkedIn profile on the chat line, so if you want to follow up, please feel free to do so. I've had a career in AI and cybernetics for about 30 years in a variety of roles, both in technology as well as in the business side. So I kind of have two hats, which is a little bit unusual, but I hope it will come out here. I'm very enthusiastic about the conversation that we've had. It is indicative of the real progress that has occurred, that Imtiaz has highlighted in the technology. So there's a solution ready for a problem. Now, the investors and the VCs that have been on the call, and I hope a few still are, have highlighted that this is different times, and indeed it really is. And so what we really need to do is to find real, genuine problems that can be addressed in a short time frame, that have a high ROI, that have a good corporate social responsibility, that can really make an impact in these pandemic and post-pandemic scenarios. And that's what I've been trying to do over the past 3 or 4 months since the emergence of COVID-19. Now, very early on in that period, I looked for an organization which would be able to help incubate some of those ideas, to help make them real, to get traction, to do things and not just talk about things. And so I joined the American Association for Precision Medicine, which is an organization I'll show a few slides about, and I became the team lead for the data science and AI task force of that organization. Now, I'm going to be talking about solutions, I'm going to be talking about projects, but you'll get an idea of where I'm going, I trust. So let me just start the presentation. So the first thing to note is black swan events, as is often called out to be for COVID-19, are not really black swan events at all. These have been quite predictable. They've been plaguing mankind since we were able to speak the word mankind, perhaps. My point is that it's not just black swan events in terms of pandemics that disrupt the market, But we have events like wars, we have events like terrorist events, etc., which changes the zeitgeist. And we're in one of those, one of the biggest ones since the Second World War right now. So it changes the way we need to behave. It changes the way that we need to do business. Now, there is an opportunity to talk about the road to recovery, something that we're trying to manifest in our easation of these lockdown events. But how do we make that happen? Not only cure people, reduce the R rate for transmissions and the morbidity rates for COVID-19, but prepare ourselves for opening up economies. So technology can help. Let's just talk a little bit about the task force that I've joined and what they're trying to do. So basically, it's a bunch of chaps who are working in AI as well as domain-specific areas in therapeutics, diagnostics, and supply chain, and trying to build some real transactions or real projects that will impact and provide value to the world as well as to individual companies that it may spawn. They have a whole bunch of supporters that are helping us do that. I won't say too much of that, but you'll know many of these companies. And one of the real benefits of working with the APN that I have found is that they have real in-depth domain experience at the highest and most senior levels. And when you're working with technology, you really do need to reach out to people with domain experience to make sure that the solutions that you are coming up with, these innovations, have genuine impact in the way that these folks know how business is done. So let me talk about one project to give an example. We start off a story. I'm going to give you a little narrative here. You'll see what I mean in a few moments. So we're going to start about how can we stop pandemics happening when they are emergent epidemics. And the way to do that is to use technology at one level to be able to build a digital twin, a predictive model, such that it can determine prefigurement in data, in say online social network data, that prefigures the confirmations and the hospitalization of individuals that have an emergent pathogen. So here's the story that I was talking about, the narrative. So Sue Smith, she goes on a vacation to Italy to meet families, meet her family members, and she's looked at advisory notices. This is in November, December of last year. And though there is a worrying notice of an epidemic, there's nothing giving her a warning about Northern Italy. So she has a traditional experience, but towards the end, she gets tweeted that her uncle is not feeling so well, and she had dinner with him just the previous day. The problem is, as I say, is that this is a precursor, the first part of the story. We need to find out epidemics before they become pandemics. How can we do that? Just look at some of the figures I've provided here about how big the negative impact is in the time of the epidemic and how much hope there is that these will rebound and economies will recover. And there are models, but as you've been watching, no doubt, on the news every day, the models are generally based upon human knowledge of how diseases spread through society, but some of these diseases, some of these pathogens are novel, like novel coronavirus, and identifying whether this is swine flu-like or SARS-like or Zika-like. Some are mediated by vectors of insects, other waterborne like cholera, others by aerosols and airborne diseases like SARS and COVID-19. Now let's just look about how the markets moved. The first point to note is that round about the 3rd of February, a trend started to be established in terms of deaths from COVID-19. And the market was fairly holding up throughout that period, and only 3 weeks later did the real impact of markets occur. For the fintech chaps out there, this should be really important, because if you can predict the emerging trend of an epidemic, you can do really well in fintech opportunities. Now, this is real data from Wuhan. and it looks at online social network, online media from Google, Baidu, Weibo, Twitter, etc. Now look around about 18th of January. Remember that first graph about the emerging trend was February the 3rd. A full 2 to 3 weeks before suspected, and these are the dotted lines of suspected and confirmed cases, a full 3 weeks, there was prefigurement. People were tweeting, I'm not feeling so well, I've lost my appetite, or I can't go to work today. Thousands, tens of thousands of people in Wuhan were providing that data, accessible data. You can buy tweets. So that's indicative of something that could be built. And we've built in APM a patent pending technology that looks at that. That's project 1. Project 2, I'm going to take you through, is how we could use technology to do pre-screening and care delivery. The deluge of people being concerned about their medical problems really impact the ability for healthcare systems to respond effectively. So can we use technology? Yes, we can. We can build pre-screening systems. The particular one I'm talking about is the Remoscope chatbot, which is basically an ecosystem beyond just chatbots, but electronic health record, encryption and depersonalization systems, telemedicine consultations by video, payment systems, blockchain financial transaction systems to buy tests, to buy pharmaceuticals, to pay for those video consultations perhaps. And so Sue is able to use one of these devices to be able to have a telemedicine visit, and she has to maybe get a test, and she hears that her uncle has been hospitalized, is now on a ventilator. She's worried. She needs this reassurance that she will be looked after. So the problem is healthcare collapse in pandemics. And the numbers of errors that are caused by overwork, the number of deaths by mistakes, and the fact that some existing in use neural networks and NLP mechanisms aren't really up to the job. They're 5 to 7 year old technology. It's not the latest generation. They have trust issues, for example. So the Remoscope solution has a clear, massive market opportunity. We could go into the numbers, but I don't have time to do that. There are patents that have been filed on that. There are devices, hardware devices, which are specific for the COVID-19 symptom tracking, integrated with an accurate chatbot, integrated with electronic healthcare record systems. This is the kind of innovation we need to address the problem of pre-screening. So I could show you a demo. I don't think I have the time. The point of putting a demo here is to show you that we have traction, we have built this technology. Okay, moving down from that, because I don't think we have too much time. Maybe I'll just give you a snippet. So this is the company. I'm actually working with this company as one of the chief executives. And it's a technology we call Flume, and we can just skip through to some of the transactions which are demoed here. And so this shows some of the interactions. This particular interaction is using a blockchain transaction system to pay for health credits for the individual. So there's a chatbot transaction, a high-level conceptual semantic network, which is hybrid AI. I imagine Imitiaz's ears are burning right now, because hybrid AI is where it is at, where people like Jeffrey Hinton and others are really trying to develop it. We've actually got technology that does that. So I'm trying to move on now. So I'm now going to talk about another project. Now this project, I think Rudy Medina is on this call. It's one of his projects that I've been working with him. And this, in terms of the narrative, this is now where Sue Smith is in a hospital. She's in an ICU. And she needs to be ventilated. The technical term is intubated. It's a complex process. It takes 5 to 6 humans and 30 to 40 minutes interacting with a person who's highly contagious. It's a risky business. These healthcare workers on the front line are dying, but it needs to be done. So in this case, the narrative is fairly clear. She needs support from the healthcare people to do that without overloading. So as I say, again, the problem is healthcare collapse. Pandemics have raised issues with containment, biohazards. The problem is compounded by the need to rapidly, how can I say, develop these tools. Not, typical development times in robotics is in months. Sometimes you need to retool and you need to do these things in a matter of days and weeks as these epidemics emerge. So this is an exoskeleton tool. Basically, it's where you have a telepresence concept. So you have one tool where, let us say, a senior consultant surgeon may be in San Francisco, but in some small town in the Midwest, there is a clinic that needs intubation support. So the concept is to use these powerful but precise virtual reality equipped precision instruments, which are configured and self-configure and tune to a patient's requirements, to be able to support these complex processes. And as those processes are repeated by the telepresence surgeon, the AI system learns the common routines and stores them so it can interactively do them without the necessity of the surgeon in presence. Again, there's a video that we've prepared here. I'm not going to spend too much time on it, but it shows the fact that this exoskeleton exists. This is a real system. It's not just an idea. It's available to be ported onto the application I'm talking about. Here you see an individual is interacting with the system, but this could be the surgeon, and their motions are being repeated in a highly contained area. It has many, many applications. So with that said, and with time being of the essence, let me move on to the final stage of Sue Smith's journey. She's been through intubation. She's come out of the hospital, but her trauma is significant. She needs help. Let me just give you one statistic. 45% of Americans reporting are suffering with COVID-19 are reporting mental health issues. That's hundreds of thousands of people with mental health issues. So how can our AI technology, our emerging technologies of virtual reality and IoT and biosignal analysis help? Well, one particular solution is Flora, and we're working on this too. And again, this is development transaction. All of the opportunities I've mentioned to you today are patent pending and are looking for serious financing to deliver them and for that to be done as soon as possible. Here is a video of how Flora could be used. It's basically an individual who has a virtual reality experience and she's talking to a counselor. That counselor might be an avatar driven by a chatbot. It doesn't necessarily have to be a human in this domain, but it could be and would be in the early stages. But the technology opportunity here is not just to address PTSD of COVID patients, but depression, anxiety, suicide ideation. And across the world, in places where psychological support is just not available. So thank you for your time. I think I'm just under 20 minutes, so I think I've done my job. I'm sorry for it being rapidly paced, and I'm sorry for not being able to show you all of the videos to show you that it's real. But if you're interested, if you want more in-depth information, please reach out to me at my email there, just jot it down. It's my name with @scienco.io, and I'd be happy to talk to you further. You know, I'll just leave you with this thought, and it's a quotation from The Tale of Two Cities by Charles Dickens. It was the best of times, it was the worst of times. Worse because we're having this suffering that we've never experienced perhaps in our generation. But it's the best of times Because not only can we address these problems with our technology and our expertise, but we can rid ourselves of plagues on mankind in the future. With that hope that we will persevere because of your talent and our actions today, I say thank you and I look forward to your cooperation. Thank you again.
Thank you, Martin. That was a wonderful presentation and very insightful. Just before we move on, I have a very quick question for you, and that is, you've been a pioneer in pushing AI, using the umbrella term, machine learning and deep learning, if you like, in the healthcare sector. At the same time, we've seen a lot of resistance in healthcare to adoption of AI technology or anxiety. Do you believe, of course, we need to proceed with care and proper testing, proper diligence, because it's meant to make people better, not have unintended negative consequences. But in reality, it's really there to also augment, isn't it? Augment the medical staff.
I'm glad you said that. I'm glad you said that, because what is AI? What is AI? To me, it's augmented intelligence. In the context that right now, for example, in diagnosis, we would have to go through significant FDA hoops if an AI system was to make a medical diagnosis and oblige that patient to have a pharmaceutical, to have a hospital visit. It would be doing the job of a diagnostician. And that is a major FDA hurdle. So what we suggest is in our telemedicine, we say, we collect the information. We say, you need maybe a telemedicine visit to confirm your situation. So it's the human that makes the decision, but equipped with all of those biosignal information, all of that symptom tracking, all of the conditions of the patient. So definitely augmented intelligence for the next 5 years. No replacement.
And so hopefully that's going to see an acceleration and adoption of AI going forwards.
And what we need to do is, when we talk about AI, I always say there are 4 use cases. The first one is productivity, and that's what everybody picks on. AI and robotics are going to replace people because they're more productive at a given job than a human is. That's not the way to look at it. That it means that a given doctor and nursing infrastructure, healthcare infrastructure, can give better quality and time to individuals. Productivity. Personalization comes right off that point, which is that you can treat people as humans and not as a factory machine line production model. That was healthcare 4.0, the digitalization. We talk about industry 4.0. In healthcare, healthcare 4.0 is that production line concept, treating people as components in an assembly line, and they're not. They're human beings. They need to be cared for. So personalization, treating every human separately and uniquely, can be done by AI. The third use case for AI is in quality. What do I mean? Precision medicine. Being able to look at the genome and to say, you need this combination of therapy. And that's unique, again, coming back to personalization. But it's that quality of precision medicine. And the fourth one, let us not forget this, is discovery. So the objective is, in the long term, is collect the data on genomes with the permission of users, so that we can understand that when a new emergent pathogen comes out, we can rapidly study the RNA of that pathogen and say, it's going to affect these people this way, and this is the drug that you have already FDA approved that you can use as a therapeutic and develop a vaccine, and do that in a robotic, automated way with a digital twin of a human, so that the FDA gets recommendations for a vaccine in a month, which is already being pre-tested on a digital twin of a human. And that can be done. That's how we rid ourselves of the plagues on mankind. It is the best opportunity for AI use case ever.
Yeah. Thank you so much. And to everybody out there, please follow Martin. You can find him on LinkedIn and Twitter. He's a world leader in AI applications for healthcare. I'm not just saying that, he really is. And I always enjoy reading his material. And it's been a real pleasure and honor to have you join. Thank you so much.
I'm burning. My face is red.
Well, we hope you stay safe and well. We want a lot more from you going forwards, and we'd love to have you on again, and your contributions to this field are vast. So thank you. So our next panel is going to be with Agath Chabib, who's CEO, and also, just as Martin is a world leader in healthcare, Agath is a world leader actually in cybersecurity, in thought leadership, etc. in that field. He's had a very extensive career based in both Germany and the United Arab Emirates, and it'd be great to hear his thoughts on what's going on both in Germany and the UAE at this moment in time with startups in AI and the cybersecurity sector. We'll be having Anya Tutova, who works with startups, including early stage startups as well, their funding. Elena Guskova, who has a lot of experience with startup sector and funding startups, and she's completed her MBA at London Business School, as you can see here, alongside myself, and Columbia Business School, and with the dual MBA. And we're going to have Paolo coming back with us, as well as Xavier Gomez. And Xavier is CEO and founder of Invio Analytics in Paris, good friend of mine, and always has something interesting to say. So I hope we'll be able to carry on these high quality discussions onto the next panel. In actual fact, I'm going to hand over to Richard, but maybe to bring that forward. But thank you again to Martin and Agath for being available on the time zone difference in Dubai, and same with Elena. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Imtiaz. First of all, I'd like to get the perspective, because we've heard a lot from the US, Silicon Valley, and even Europe today. Are you seeing the same trends where you are, or are you seeing different things happening?
No, I would like to say, I see definitely even stronger trends where in UAE. I don't know if you hear that UAE in 2017, they announced the first AI ministers, and they put a strategy for the AI strategy for the next 30 years, which include a lot of investment in high-tech technology and AI to support and to enhance and empower the citizens' life in different aspects, in the transport, in the e-health sectors, and retails, and based on a lot of study, they also even able to generate in the next 30 years around $98 billion from this investment, actually, as a return in the AI and the latest technology. Here in UAE also we have around 100 startups, AI startups, and if you look at them, you see a lot of interesting and very promising technology they're working on now currently. And therefore, I believe being here in UAE is very exciting. The trend is very strong in AI. There's a lot of support. We even have now in 2019, I think October was this, announced the first AI university. And this will be the first university for bachelor degree in the world. Therefore, I would say I see the same trend also like in Silicon Valley, also here in UAE.
We often think about smart cities when we think about the UAE. Agath, has that been derailed slightly at this time, or do you still see that to be a world leader in your geography?
No, definitely. The smart cities here is already like, I believe, Dubai and UAE in general, the e-government and the smart city, it is very, very effective. Like you can do literally everything from home through apps and through online services. In some cases, I found it even better than many other countries in Europe. There's in Abu Dhabi also, they're building now the first and biggest smart city in the world. Will be like 100% sustainable cities where everything will be built on renewable energy and will be 100% sustainable smart city, and the biggest also in the world. Definitely this, we need to take care, like with all this digital transformation, as other panelists say today, the wake-up call we had through this COVID-19 to enforce the government, to enforce the companies to go to digitalization. Unfortunately, it's come also with a lot of risk because as Imtiaz said, there will be like 75 billion devices connected to the internet. And this will open really a huge surface of attacks for cybersecurity criminals, where they are using and now taking advantage of this pandemic, actually.
We see there's been problems in Toronto and Sidewalk Labs not being able to get off the ground, and mostly because of pushback from the community and from society. On the other extreme, we see smart cities in China where you don't get to have any pushback. Do you think cities like Dubai have got the balance better between data privacy and AI acceleration?
Yes, I see this actually very strong. If you look at initiatives happening here and all the information, also the way of information sharing, they try also to integrate and comply a lot with international standards for data privacy, like GDPR and other data privacy, in order really to take care of the citizens' data and the way how to share it through the different entities there. And I believe here we're doing very well in this terms, in terms of there's a huge investment also in the cybersecurity part, to protect the data. The latest technology have been implemented. I have been also involved in multiple projects where you can see really there's a big concern about data privacy and big concern about how to deal with the customers and citizens' data in terms also in smart cities and the integration and this move to the digital transformation journey.
Elena, I guess talked about sustainability there just before we talked about data and trust. What impact has COVID-19 had on ESG?
What do you mean, ESG?
Environmental sustainability and governance. Do you think?
I think. Sorry to interrupt there, Richard. I think maybe with Elena, I think with her speciality being early stage startup funding, maybe it's better to focus on Elena's experience with what's going on with startup funding and the early stage there. Because I think.
Yeah, that sounds good to me. But are you seeing sustainability, green tech, clean tech to be an area that you really want to get more involved in, or has that become derailed slightly as other technologies take precedence?
Basically, I would like to introduce myself. My name is Elena Gusikova. I'm co-founder of Astra Global, and it's a business development company. We help startups with funding and also basically with some deal advice during this. We had recently several investors panel dedicated to current landscape for investors, and I would say that there is a shift to health tech, of course, nowadays, and in general, investors are still willing to invest more in startups because the pricing is good, and I would say that that there is still interest as well in sustainability projects and green tech, clean tech as well. Yeah, so I don't see that it depends on how much, I mean, how well they adjusted to the current environment, and if they adjusted, I think investors are in general very positive. They say that only the strongest projects will survive the current situation. And in general, I think COVID will be also a good kind of challenge for projects. First of all, to think a little bit ahead about how much cash do they have just in case. And I mean, I would say that in general, all those areas are still very relevant, and investors still want to invest.
And your background's fintech and health tech, I believe. So I did throw you a curveball there, asking you about clean tech. Is that business as usual then? Or certainly health tech maybe is getting quite exciting now as we think about how to protect ourselves better for the future. Are you having those conversations already? Do you want to unmute yourself again?
So Elena, that was a question for you. What can you hear us, Elena?
Yeah, sorry.
So maybe if I just crystallize that, just in case, what your speciality has been early stage funding, and what do you see going on in the themes of fintech, health tech, and AI and these areas? Is there something specific that you think investors are looking at? What do you think the opportunities will be post COVID-19 as well?
Okay, so basically what I think that for the moment, of course, many investors are working with current portfolio companies, and on the one hand side, on the other hand side, now is a very good time for networking with investors, because investors are relatively easily accessible, because everyone basically stays at home, and many investors mentioned that it's the right time maybe to use this pause for more, for creating tighter in a way connections to investors. So for the startups, it's a good, very good opportunity to talk more to investors. And I think that in general, many investors that we are talking to, again, as I mentioned, they're still willing to invest, and they're still willing to look at new projects. And I think that the projects need to be active in starting negotiations with investors about raising finance. And maybe the deal will not be closed right now, but many investors say that they would be ready to close the deal even without meeting startups personally. But I think that in general, after the crisis is over, then startups will be ready to the new deals. And in terms of fintech and AI, of course, those are industries that are making the economy in general very efficient, right? As we have been discussing the whole series, the whole panel. And of course, all those technologies are becoming more and more relevant. And of course, after pandemic, I think, again, this new situation, it helps people learn new ways of interaction, and all those technologies, they're becoming more and more important. And I think the current COVID situation, it even give a boost to such technologies. And I think it's really a pause in a way, but after this pause, I think there will be a big and very active period for fintech, for artificial intelligence, for new technologies, because people now have to learn how to live in the most efficient way with very scarce resources, I would say.
Elena, thank you.
Just before we go over to Anya, sorry to jump in, Richard. So as a key piece of advice then you say to early stage startup founders is don't keep on building, get out there, talk to people such as yourself who are connected to the VCs and try and get out there with your business plans, but have your business plans realistic of the current situation. Would that be fair?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's very fair.
Great.
And recently we had a talk, we had a panel series where you also attended, Imtiaz, with US investors. And what they say like, you know, if you don't go out and you don't reach to investors now, then it's a big mistake.
Yeah. Perfect, thanks. Maybe Rachel, I'll hand over to you for
yeah. I'm just thinking, so Elena talked about you might still need a bit of patience though as you look for early stage funding. And whilst that might be the case, it's going to be a very exciting time, isn't it, for early stage ventures?
Hello everyone, let me first introduce myself as well. My name is Anna Tutova. I'm CEO of Coinstelegram. We are a consulting agency and we advise different tech startups. Mostly we work with blockchain companies, and we specialize in PR and marketing. And additionally, I represent as well early stage startup called Alliance API, and we are building IoT integration platform, decentralized SaaS solution with security features for IoT devices. So regarding your question as for fundraising for early stage startups, yes, it's really a challenge because in case with startups which raise funds like for Series A or Series B, they already have some traction, they already have sales clients, and they can show to investors that they have some cash. So for early stage startups, it's a different case. But nevertheless, we can see that even during the crisis, some last crisis, more than 50 unicorns appeared, such companies as Airbnb, Stripe, Uber, Spotify, etc. And I consider that, first of all, early stage startups should approach first investors who they know personally, so they build with them some kind of relationships. There is already trust between your startup and investor, and as well, when you exhaust your network, you can ask your advisors, your network, to make some warm introductions to some VCs investors. So that's it. And additionally, such crisis as coronavirus may be a challenge, but it's as well a big opportunity for startups to economize, to save money on different expenses, as for example, traveling and making face-to-face meetings with investors, with potential clients. Now or like renting office. Now you can just sit at home, conduct all the meetings online, and it costs $0 for you.
So thank you for that, Anya. And in terms of the startups that are more likely to get funded, sorry to put you on the spotlight here, but what do you think is going to make the difference in this challenging situation? Is it going to be the quality of the management team, the business plan, working with advisors such as yourself and Elena? What is it going to be, in your opinion?
In my opinion, some startups should reconsider their business models, their proposition to the market, but those startups which have right fit to the market will always survive and will always have possibility to get investors. And as well, we are talking now about digital startups, so they are not much influenced by this pandemic. All digital startups, for me, are booming. Currently, we are talking about fintech, healthcare, and AI, and all these industries are quite broad. So, for example, as for fintech startups, they are alternative for traditional banks, and now everybody uses more and more online services. So, like for example, there are different sections of fintech, like trading platforms, because additionally because of the market volatility, they attract more and more users. Or, for example, different lending platforms, so P2P payment services, etc. Or, for example, in case of AI, there are different uses of AI. But, for example, I know one company, but it's a biotech company called Jira AI, and first. Their proposition is that they discover some drugs to combat aging using AI. And these days, in such situations, they used AI and their researchers to find the drugs against COVID-19.
Great, excellent. Thanks for that. I suggest that we bring in Xavier to get the perspective of Paris and early startup funding there, and then Paolo from his thoughts on startup funding in London at the Series A and B level as well, and then maybe have Elena and Anya continue that if we've got the time. That'd be awesome. So Xavier, maybe if you want to. Sorry, Richard, I kind of treaded on your toes there a bit, but thanks a lot, Anya. We'd like to bring you back in with Elena on follow-up thoughts. Xavier, if you're still there, could you just tell us your thoughts on Paris?
Yes, thank you, Matthias. Thank you, Richard. I just want to give one comment about the question of Richard. I think at the moment, the investment, the reason of investment is pushed by also request of ESG criteria. A lot of ultra high net worth and high net worth individual request a sense to their investment to align the interest of the company and the society and the development of the company. We see a lot of requests in terms of data on that, because as you see on financial markets, you have a lot of volatility. We know high level of volatility since 2008 now on market, but this is not the reality of economy of society. As you know, the economy has been piloted by central bank, and now you see a huge request of investor about to align the interests between ESG criteria. Very interesting value proposition for the society and for the people from startup, and of course we need funding on that. And we have a lot of requests of data from financial institution. By the way, I forgot to introduce myself. I'm the co-founder of Invio. Invio is a pan-European platform specialist in business intelligence powered by machine learning and NLP, and we provide data to financial institutions such as banks, insurance company, VC fund, private equity firms. In fact, we leverage the power of data contextualization by using advanced technologies to process and classify millions of unstructured data coming from both video and text document, and our tools are being used by leading company and various divisions such as sales, marketing, financial marketing teams, innovation department, research and analyst teams, and also investment division. Of course, for the fund, for the funding, we see a big drop in comparison of the beginning of this year. For example, Paris, it's around 600 million euro at fundraising each month for all tech sector, and for the last month it was half, around 300 million of euro, and the best one today you can imagine, it's health and health tech and biotech, in comparison with retail and fintech just before the COVID. And we see also a huge support of French government to give a warranty to VC funds in order to go on to invest in tech ecosystem. Because the worry of French government is to stop the digitalization movement of France at the moment. The President Emmanuel Macron is very keen on that, and they want to create a French licorne. It's not so easy because usually for the big round, the mature startup go outside of France to look for money, in particular in London, in UK, or US. And now the risk is the reduction of funding, as you can imagine, and the reduction of competition. And of course, we expect some fallout, around 40% of tech ecosystem in France on each sector, and the French government want to avoid that. This is the reason why with a BPI, a state bank, they invest a lot with the VC to support the sector, in particular, as mentioned, the health sector for the research with COVID treatment. And it's also this sanitary crisis a big opportunity for France and for Europe, I think so, because in fact this is a large-scale proof of concept of digitalization, because everybody look forward to make a business, and the small merchant find a solution in order to make a turnover, and they clearly look for a fintech solution, a tech solution, in order to go on the business. And for that, the COVID, it's a good thing, clearly. It's a good advancement, and now we want to push the deployment of 5G for the next autumn, to start the deployment in France in order to accelerate this movement. And of course, one point where you don't talk about the skills of different employees is very simple to understand how works Zoom, but for AI, machine learning, and so on. We need to reinforce the skills of employees to integrate young data scientists and push the diversity of team in order to transform all the economy sector. Yeah.
Thank you for that, Xavier. I'll probably get some noise here actually in the background when some people start clapping. In a few minutes, we have this thing in the UK for clapping for the NHS, which is an important thing as well. So those who wish to do that, I usually do. But I think I'm going to take a bit of the blame for Richard did a great job, but for this kind of slightly overrunning, because I should have tried to have the earliest section a bit shorter. But I think in particular because Xavier, Elena, Anya, and Agaif are in different time zones, in particular Agaif and Elena, and Anya being more hours ahead, want to give them a fair shot. But Paolo, if you're still there, I don't know if Paolo's still there or if he's gone for the, yes, you are.
Yeah.
What early stage funding and Series A, etc., seeds A and B, what are your thoughts in London? Is it more naturally more challenging now? What do you think is going to happen with startups in that level?
So anecdotally, I know of people who were in the process of fundraising, and this has slowed down. So I think there's a couple of elements here. One is this is the typical market environment where opportunistic investments are made. So you see, deal activity on that front. For the more typical fundraising, VC type fundraising, I think there was a period where everything was kind of everything stopped, and I believe that over the last 2 or 3 weeks we are probably kind of coming off that, and there's a bit of activity still starting to resume. But I think we are not out of the woods yet, and activity is slower than than normal. Certainly for closing transactions. I think most people are still, most VCs are still very, very interested in kind of build a pipeline and engage with companies that they will see as success stories as this kind of pandemic eases. But I think it's there's two different narratives. Now is it's a tough moment, but we are kind of we're starting to see the seeds of transactions going to be closing later, and overall I think the environment for financial technologies or companies is actually very positive, because you could see most of the investments channeled in our area. So I think I'm generally positive, but right now it's kind of difficult to close some deals. Very good to come your hands. NHS is 8 o'clock, so I joined that.
We can show our appreciation digitally for our healthcare workers too. So thank you to them. Thanks for that, Paolo. May I say thank you to all the NHS workers and indeed healthcare workers around the world who put themselves in harm's way to try and keep us safe. Building on that point, so Elena, and turning to, and I want to come back to Gav as well, and Anya, and maybe just make this an open chat between all of you with Paolo and Xavier. Again, coming back to this crisis, if you like, we're having a crisis with COVID-19, a healthcare crisis. We're unfortunately going to see an economic challenge as well. But as you pointed out, there are still opportunities for startups. And do you think that if a startup thinks carefully and pitch themselves correctly, that in actual fact, they can find the new opportunities? So basically, really, it's your thoughts on the new opportunities and how people should figure those out. I mean, really, startup founders should figure that out themselves. But what do you see as the themes basically coming through that?
Definitely, there are kind of plenty of new opportunities nowadays. I would say even when we are talking to the funds, they kind of cannot stop investing, especially bigger funds, especially in the US. In the US, they're very kind of even aggressive. They think it's a great time for buying companies. And I mean, this would be a really harsh time for first-time entrepreneurs. It would be impossible or almost impossible to raise money for people who are first-time entrepreneurs. But people who already did projects before, and even earlier stage projects, they have certain advantages nowadays, because later stage projects and I think private equity, they got hit pretty badly because they have certain established business models and they cannot probably pivot them so easily as early stage ventures. So, I mean, I would say maybe strangely enough, or like early stage ventures are the earlier the stage sometimes is the better now, right? So you can definitely adjust more easier than later stage or private equity, for example. They're in a
Great.
bad
Thank you.
situation. So I think for venture capital and for raising money is a good timing. But I think for startup they also need to understand if it's a good timing. Me being myself a consultant and advising startups how to raise equity, I also suggest them to be careful. And we're gonna have our next event on that, sharing experience from entrepreneurs to entrepreneurs in terms of their equity raising experience. This is not always the best fit for the startup at a certain stage if they have no traction or basically too early, for example, for the equity. So for example, for the moment, I see no. I would say everything goes on. I mean, of course, a lot of investors, especially small investors, I would say, they focus on. They start being focused on their portfolio companies more. And this is true. And somebody mentioned before that basically no new investments have been made. I don't agree with that, because we had investors panel recently, and like in the US, people are more, I would say, bigger funds. They even say we cannot stop investing because they have certain amount of money they need to invest. So I would say for startups for the moment, they really need, I mean, it's a great now opportunity to network. I mean, even if you don't meet personally, but investors are much more accessible.
Yeah. So thank you for
because
that.
Usually they travel. Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead. I'll let you think.
No, that I think that people usually they travel a lot, and now they all sit at home and they're available to talk, and they say it themselves. So we're very open. Please reach out to us. I mean, you should know investor, or you should probably know him through a network, and it shouldn't be super cold. But I mean, it's a good time. Did I answer your question?
Yes, you did. Thank you very much. It seems like I recall in that session they were saying, whilst the VC activity might slow down, they'll be investing closer to home, but they'll be ready, especially still come and pitch to them, because they'd still like to work in a few months' time as they start to reach out again. So absolutely keep on building and reaching out, as you pointed out. And Anya, it'd be great to get your thoughts on that same matter. So I think you're on mute.
Yeah, I agree with Elena that now at this time investors are much more approachable. Everybody stays at home, nobody travels. Like there is no that hustle that was before. So now investors have opportunity to look deeper and to check more projects, etc. And additionally, this is as well opportunity for startups to make investors confident that they can survive during these tough circumstances. So that means that these are strong, sustainable startups. And as well, it depends what startup do. For example, we see the search of the users for like different video platforms, gaming startups, trading platforms, etc. So in this way, this is as well big chances, big opportunities for the companies.
Awesome. Thank you for that, Anya. Agaif, what do you see happening with startup funding in the Gulf region, including the UAE? Do you see that, are we having a temporary pause in your opinion, or do you think it's going to come back? What would you do if you're an early stage startup?
Actually, what I didn't mention before, besides that I'm in cybersecurity, the CEO of the Fikra right now. in this field since 20 years. I am also the president and one of the co-founders for Tech ABC, where we are building an apps ecosystem powered by blockchain and AI engine. It's designed actually to empower and to deliver innovative fintech solution for the customers and to empower cities and citizens. And we running now also like kind of, we have been in discussion with some investors here for get round A or seed funding actually. But we realize that the investors here that are a little bit now on board, maybe for us here in the region, because we hit strong for the coronavirus and then the oil price crash and everything. Then, like what I realized from my own experience that they are already on pause right now. They want to rethink how to go and what to do exactly before to move forward. I agree with Elena and Anna that it is great time actually to invest because they are like more accessible. You can discuss with them. They have time, even like usually you go for a pitch for like 15 minutes. Now they have the time to listen for you for 30 minutes and ask questions, send the data, and you see that they really looking for a good opportunity where to put the money and to invest in good technology. But they still very, let's say, careful still. It is not like years before, or like if you have good products or at least some traction, then things will move much faster. So this is my own opinion here, but I am realizing here in UAE and in Dubai.
Great, thank you for that. And I think I'm under instructions from Richard that we've hit the deadline. The
That's your 10 minutes, yep. That's it.
Xavier, I'm sorry we didn't get more of you tonight, but we did get you yesterday. So apologies that we didn't get more of you, but we'll definitely do it again. And Paolo, thank you for your insights, and always a pleasure. And we'll hope to catch up with you when we're allowed to, again in London, because we're neighbours here. And yeah, and to everybody, Anya, again, some great insights. Elena, as ever, always enjoyed a discussion with you. Martin, fantastic to have a world leader in healthcare. Gareth, to have a world leader in cybersecurity as yourself, and all the experience that you have, that's been wonderful. And to everyone else who spoke, Richard, I'll let you formally close it.
Just another vote of thanks. I'll echo those for the speakers tonight. It means the world to us that you come and spend some time with us. MTS has been driving these things so hard. So busy behind the scenes, you wouldn't believe it. It's incredible. Thank you for what you do, MTS. And if you like this, we'd love to do more of this. And do let me know. Find me on LinkedIn. You know me, Richard Foster-Fletcher. Let me know. Let me have your feedback. Do you like this format? What worked? What didn't work for you? Want to do these regularly? Want to make the best we can be? We are the community. We're all over the world, but we are connected. We are one. We can see how much we share visions. It's an honor and a privilege always to spend time with you. Thank you so much.